Chapter 2: Unfavorable Departure. The first thing we are interested in is a villa in another city in the same province. The villa is quite old and should have been built in the early 1990s. The owner of the villa is a local tycoon surnamed Wang. It's a coincidence that Yiheng and I met him. One day, Yiheng accidentally saw his sales post on an online real estate forum and gave him a try on the phone. Unexpectedly, we hit it off and immediately scheduled a meeting. To this day, the business of this local tycoon has been getting bigger and bigger, but it still cannot change its nouveau rich temperament. When we met, I roughly estimated that the gold jewelry on his body weighed several pounds in total. As he spoke, his fingers pointed to the table and the gold watch on his wrist shook, making my eyes dizzy. According to the local tycoon, he took advantage of the good opportunity of the recent reform and opening up and made a few windfalls. With more money on hand, he naturally began to crave enjoyment. This house was bought by him after he became wealthy. After living for a few years, he moved to another new house. Because there was no shortage of money, the villa was not sold and was only sublet to a painter as a creative studio. This painter is not very famous either, and he is said to be very strange. The people who originally lived in the villa area were either wealthy or wealthy, and they didn't like to socialize with their neighbors. So this painter has always been mysterious, and hasn't appeared since the day he moved in. After a year, when he came to collect the rent, he realized that the painter had already died in the villa. This is also the most eerie part of this villa, which sounds a bit like a fantasy. The entire villa has been decorated by painters in the shape of a tomb, and the walls are covered with murals, all of which are vision blueprints for feathering and ascending to immortality. In the middle of the hall, there is not only a coffin, but also a coffin, which looks very high in size. The entire villa's doors and windows are tightly locked, with only a few long extinguished eternal lights. At that time, the wealthy man surnamed Wang was so scared that he went to the bathroom and called the police. After the police arrived, they didn't find anything, so they determined it was suicide, and the house remained empty. To this day, property prices have skyrocketed, and even if he is wealthy, he still feels heartbroken when he looks at such an empty house. He thinks that no matter how much money he sells, it's better than looking at it like this. That's why his assistant posted online and went to the real estate agency to register, intending to sell the villa at a cheaper price. As the local tycoon said, "This house is really mysterious." Yiheng suggested going to see the house first before making any plans. After all, it's just talk on paper now. The local tycoon seems to be very wary of that villa, just handing us the keys and letting us go see the house ourselves. We didn't delay either, holding the key and following the address. When we went to see it, the coffin had already been emptied, but the murals on the wall were still there. It goes without saying that all haunted houses have one thing in common, which is that, when you push the door and enter, you can feel the gloomy air. The whole villa is not very large in this villa group, about 230 square meters. The living room is quite magnificent and in line with the aesthetic standards of a wealthy person. Yiheng and I walked around for a while. He looked around for a while and his face lit up with joy. He told me that this house is not even considered a haunted house, and there are no ghosts or anything like that. We bought it for pure profit. I was also happy to hear him say that, and I wasn't so nervous anymore. I curiously went to see the murals on the wall. The murals are indeed eerie, using oil painting techniques that are very realistic, but the completion is relatively sloppy. The content should be about the painter imagining himself ascending to immortality from inside this house, with a group of boys and girls following him towards heaven as protectors. Because it was painted using oil painting techniques to depict traditional Chinese things, it looks a bit out of place. I've probably looked at a few of them, and I feel something's wrong because the one who ascended to immortality in this painting is a woman. This is not a matter of hair length, although many painters have hair that is not short. Because the painting is very realistic, it can still be seen that the woman's figure is quite good. Although I thought it was strange, I didn't think about it. Originally, it was difficult for ordinary people to understand the artist's thoughts, and besides, I wasn't very interested in it. I was just making my money. So I had a brief conversation with Yiheng, and planned to sign a contract with that local tycoon this afternoon. The contract was signed smoothly and the price was within our expected range. The market value of this villa should be over 900,000 yuan. We only spent a little over 100,000 yuan to acquire it, and both sides believe they have made a profit. The local tycoon not only solved a heartache but also earned money. We also found a big bargain, so everyone was very happy and had a great time eating and drinking. Next is the question of the purpose of this house. I quite like this villa, although it's quite old. At least it's also a villa. For me, who comes from a poor background, It is unimaginable to live in a villa in this lifetime. Therefore, I hope to renovate it and keep it for myself. Yiheng didn't object either. He just told me that although this house doesn't have any ghosts or gods, it seems to have some meaning in feng shui, but he doesn't really understand it. We need to find someone who understands feng shui to take a good look at it. Who knew that a day later, before we could find a master of feng shui, that local tycoon approached us and said he wanted to buy the villa back. As a businessman, I am certainly willing to do so, as long as the price he offers is reasonable and allows me to make a profit. It is like picking up money for nothing. After discussing the price, the local tycoon decided to offer 200,000 yuan. I thought about making a net profit of a small 100,000 yuan, which was almost enough, so I let go and agreed. However, I am curious why the house we just sold was so rushed to buy back. At night, Yiheng and I thought there must be some tricks involved, so we decided to postpone the contract and sign it again. Let's first investigate from the side what's going on. So, I asked at nearby mahjong parlors, tea houses, and other places, and only then did I know that not only did the painter die, but also a model that the painter was painting died in the same coffin as him. In this way, it corresponds to the woman in the mural. But why did the local tycoon tell us that only one person died? Is it that he doesn't know? This is obviously not appropriate, and besides, it is already a haunted house. He said that there is not much difference between dying one person and dying two people. Obviously, he is lying, and the reason is definitely not that. Now my curiosity has been aroused, and Yiheng is also very interested. We have decided to investigate carefully again. Finally, we summed up and went to that villa again. T.S. already afternoon when we arrived at the villa, and we were actually wandering aimlessly inside. It seems like we didn't notice much when we looked around. I ran to look at those murals again, but I didn't see any clues. We were standing on the balcony on the second floor smoking and chatting about this matter. He said, probably this boss is afraid that we will discover some of his secrets. I also agree with this point. If that's the case, then this secret is likely discovered by the boss only recently, otherwise he wouldn't have sold the house to us. I speculate that the boss may have killed the woman and happened to see the painter turning the villa into a tomb, so he decided to put the woman's body in to disturb the view, so he could get away with it. Yiheng felt that this inference was not very realistic, because in that case, it would be difficult to explain the woman on the mural. He was more inclined to believe that there might be something hidden in a certain part of the villa from the wealthy landowner. Perhaps the wealthy landowner was not aware of it before the house was sold, and when the house was sold, he suddenly realized, or remembered it, which was why he came to us, to make amends. Is there something buried in the house? I was quite excited after hearing this. I thought to myself, if it were an antique treasure or something, wouldn't it be legally considered mine now? So I earned this 100,000 yuan price difference. Didn't I just pick up sesame seeds and lose watermelons? If that's the case, I will definitely not sell the house. We chatted and saw that the sun had already set, and both of us were talking with dry tongues. So we prepared to go back home, and think about coming back the next day to search for the treasure. If it really happened as we thought, then the treasure wouldn't be lost so easily. After hesitating for a while, we were ready to go downstairs. Just as he walked up the stairs, Yiheng suddenly turned his head and squeezed his eyes at me, making a shush gesture. Then he quickly leaned in my ear and said, "Something has come back. You should learn to do it like me." This sentence almost scared me to wet my pants. At this moment, it was not completely dark yet. Looking down, it was hazy and my vision was not very good. At this moment, Yiheng stuffed something into my mouth and told me to hold my breath. I must not swallow anything in my mouth. I closed my eyes and followed him. When I felt something hit, I would forcefully spray it out of my mouth. I hadn't heard from Liuzhi before he left, so I had to follow suit.